Right, so this is the second lesson of the eye. And I'm going to make it very short. It's not going to last a full half an hour. Okay, so remember that I said to you last lesson that there are 3 layers in the eyeball, and the innermost layer of the wall of the eyeball is called the retina. It doesn't go completely around the eye. It lines the back of the eye, and it only goes as far forward as the ciliary body. The retina is a very thin layer consisting of several layers of neurons and light sensitive, correctly termed photoreceptor cells. And those photoreceptors, there are 2 different kinds. They're called rods and cones. And I'll talk about rods and cones just now. I'll get back to it, Tony. Okay, so those photoreceptor cells respond to the stimulus of light. And what they do then is they send an impulse via the optic nerve to the visual center and the occipital lobes of the cerebrum at the back of the brain. And then there's an area within the retina that is called the fovea or fovea centralis, and that is aligned with the central axis of the lens. So in other words, if one looked straight ahead, then light rays that came from straight ahead and go through the center of the lens and reach the back of the eyeball, they would reach what is called the fovea. So that's not light rays which come in from the corner of your eye if you're looking at something straight ahead. So the fovea is in the center of an area called the macula, and the macula and the fovea are the regions of clearest vision. So if you look at something ahead of you now, then you can see things around the periphery of your eye, but you can't see them clearly. What you can see very clearly is the light rays coming off the object that is straight ahead of you. And those light rays are hitting the photoreceptors in the fovea. And so the fovea is very tightly packed cone cells. There are no rods in the fovea, and it produces the highest visual resolution anywhere on the retina because it has so many cones so tightly packed together with each other, but I'll show you that in a picture just now. Okay, so if you look here, let's quickly go through again the layers of the eyeball. Okay, so sclera is the outermost layer, and remember the sclera in the front bulges outwards because it's thicker, and that part of the sclera here, remember, is called the cornea, and that's transparent. Okay, the second layer is called the choroid layer, and the choroid layer is the layer that's got the blood vessels and a lot of pigment in it, very dark black pigment, which absorbs light, so that light rays don't reflect around within the eyeball, which would cause a very fuzzy picture. And then the 2 other important things that you need to know about the choroid layer is that right in the front, the choroid bends inwards. It doesn't go all the way to the middle. And so this part of the choroid is the iris, and that the iris in the middle here, because it doesn't go to the middle, forms the pupil, and the muscles of the iris are able to control the size of the pupil. Then the second important thing about the front of the choroid is that there's a little bump in the choroid, and that little bump is called the ciliary body, and the ciliary body contains ciliary muscles. There are 2 different kinds. They're radial and they are circular ciliary muscles. Iris also has radial and circular. Don't confuse those 2. And then from the ciliary body, you will see that there are little suspensory ligaments. Now remember that this is 3-dimensional. It's all the way around the eyeball. And those suspensory ligaments attach to the periphery of the lens of the eye. So we'll talk about the lens of the eye. And those, the suspensory ligaments in the ciliary body, change the shape of the lens and therefore are able to focus the rays of light and form a focused image on the retina. Then the third layer only goes to about that far. And it's shown here in this picture as a pale pink layer. Okay, it only goes that far. And that third layer is the retina. And the retina, if you look up the top here, please don't learn this. Okay, this shows the retina up here. And what you will see is that the retina consists of a number of layers of cells. And included in those layers are the photoreceptor cells, the cones and the rods. And they have slightly different structures, and they've got different functions that we'll talk about later on. And so that is the retina. And the photoreceptors are the cells that are sensitive to light, and they then send an impulse through the neurons, through the optic nerve, etc., etc. Okay, so we'll talk about the rods and the cones just now, but what you can see here is this tiny little indented part here in the retina. And that's the phobia centralis, and it's directly opposite the center of the lens. If you had to draw a line from the center of the lens through there, then where it hits the retina, that is the phobia centralis. And the phobia centralis has no rods, only has cones, and it has the highest concentration of cones, and that's why it's the region of clearest vision. Light rays falling on there give the clearest picture. Okay, we'll talk about that later on. Okay, so photoreceptors, the rods and the cones, and cones function in bright light only. So only when the sun is up or the lights are on are the cones able to function. And the cones are sensitive to color. They're also very sensitive to detail. So they see fine detail and they see color, and they only function in bright light. Rods, on the other hand, function in dim light, and up until 2017, it was thought they functioned only in dim light. But in fact, they are able to function in bright light as well, just not as effectively as cones do. Rods, on the other hand, see black and white. They don't see color at all. And they don't detect detail, but they're very sensitive to movement. So what I want you to think about is when the lights are switched off at night. So when the lights are on and you look around the room, you can see everything in color, you can see everything in detail, and it's the cones that are functioning then. But when the lights are switched off and there's only dim light within the room, first of all, you can't see detail very well, and it's the rods that are working. The cones don't work at all in dim light. And you can only see in black and white and shades of gray. So you will know, for example, that you took your red t-shirt off and you threw it over the chair next to your bed, and you know that it is red, but you can't see that it is red. You also can't see fine detail, but you're very, very sensitive to movement because the rods are more sensitive to movement than the cones are. Okay. The rods and the cones are distributed differently throughout the retina. So cones are at low density throughout the retina, but they have a sharp peak at the center, the fovea centralis, and I'll show you this on the previous picture again as well. And rods are at a high density throughout most of the retina, none in the fovea. So if you looked at this picture here, this would be rods, 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 rods. Cones start to be interspersed with the rods over here. Rods and cones, rods and cones, rods and only cones, no rods. Okay. Rods and cones. We'll go back to this. Rods and cones, rods and cones, rods and cones, fewer cones, only rods. So right towards the edges of the retina, where the retina starts to become thinner and thinner, and actually then there is no more retina. This would only be rods. Only rods, only rods, rods and cones. And here, no rods, only cones. Okay, then this nifty little spot here, where the optic nerve leaves the eyeball, no rods and no cones, this is called the blind spot. And we'll show you that just now. Okay, all right. So you need to know all these parts of the eyeball. Okay, all right, so you're happy with the retina, then this pink layer, and there's the phobia centralis, and here's the blind spot, there's the optic nerve. And so this would be rods only, and this would be rods only, and here rods and cones, here neither rods nor cones, and here only cones, no rods. Then there's the choroid, and remember that the choroid's got lots of black pigment. And then remember the two important things about the choroid in the front of the eye are the iris and the pupil. And the iris has, remember, both radial and ciliary muscles, radial and circular muscles, and is able to control the size of the pupil. And then here in the ciliary body also radial and circular muscles. And then the suspensory ligaments that hold the lens in position and are able to change the shape of the lens and are important in focusing. We'll go back to the chambers just now. Okay, this is an example of a drawing that shows the conjunctiva covering the surface of the cornea, which is actually not accurate. Don't cease. Okay. All right, so there's a medial longitudinal section. You must know the position and function of the retina, the lens, the cornea, the choroid, the sclera, the optic nerve, the ciliary muscles, and the suspensory ligaments. Right, do not learn all of this. You know that because it's in blue. But this would be if a person, and those of you who do go to an optician regularly, for example, if you've got glasses or you've got problems with your eyes, then when they shine that very bright light in the eye and look very closely in the eyeball, this is what they would be seeing. So what they can see is, here's the blind spot where the optic nerve leaves the eye and there's no photoreceptors there. Then this is the macula. The macula is a bigger region than the fovea or fovea centralis. The fovea centralis is the very center of the macula, and this is directly opposite the lens. The macula also contains a high concentration of cones, but not as many as here. And I'm only adding this word macula in here because I want you to know about it later on when we talk about eye defects. Okay. Right. So, as the fovea has no rods, small dim objects in the dark can't be seen if one looks directly at them. So, for instance, to detect faint stars in the sky, one must look just to one side of them so that the light falls on the retinal area containing numerous rods outside of the macular zone. Okay, don't look straight at them, then you're not going to see them. Sort of look at them from the side. Okay, this just shows the sclera, the choroid, and the retina. And there's the macula, and then this would be the fovea centralis. Okay, all right. And that's the end of lesson 2.